I found out my brother stole my identity and used my name to ruin my life. My name is Emily. I'm 28 years old. And if someone had told me 5 years ago that my older brother, the guy who used to carry me on his back when I was little, who swore he'd protect me from the world, would be the one to leave me homeless, jobless, and nameless, I would have laughed. But now I wish I'd never trusted him. It all started almost imperceptibly. Tiny things. A credit card arrived in my name, but I never applied for one. A call from a bank about a loan I'd supposedly requested, but I hadn't. I thought it was one of those random scams, those digital frauds that happen to everyone. But it wasn't. It was him, Josh, the same brother who promised he'd take care of me after our parents died, the same one who took over the family house to make sure everything stayed in order. He smiled at me the day I signed those papers without even reading them, said it was just a formality. I believed him, and that's how he began erasing me from my own life, step by step. The worst part? I only truly realized what had happened when I got rejected for an apartment rental. The agent showed me my credit history. Dozens of debts, blacklisted credit, closed bank accounts. I looked at it like I was reading someone else's life, but it was mine. And at the bottom of almost every document, there was a signature, Josh A. Bennett, as my guarantor. Josh and I were always very different. He was 3 years older, more outgoing, more ambitious. While I was content painting alone in my room, he wanted to rule the world. Or at least that's how our parents saw him. Everything he did was brilliant, amazing, visionary. When I showed them a drawing, my mom would say, "Oh, how cute." When he said he wanted to sell lemonade on the sidewalk, she'd say, "Look how entrepreneurial he is." And it wasn't just that. He'd break things and blame me, lie straight to their faces, and I'd be the jealous one. One time I was about 8, I found our dog bleeding because Josh tried some experiment on him. And when I told our parents, I was the one who got punished. My mom screamed at me for making up horrible stories about my own brother. My dad was more neutral, but also absent. He worked all the time, and when he was home, he wanted silence and peace. He used to say, "Siblings fight, that's normal," and made us resolve everything on our own. That just gave Josh more room to manipulate everything however he wanted. School was the same story. He was the popular one, the funny guy, teacher's favorite. I was the quiet, weird girl in the back drawing in her notebook. If someone picked on me, Josh pretended he didn't know me. But if I tried talking to his friends, he'd find a way to humiliate me in front of everyone. Adolescence made it worse. He'd go out, come home late, always with some excuse. I, on the other hand, had strict curfews. My mom would say, a proper girl doesn't hang out in the streets, and that I needed to set an example. An example for who? For Josh, who could do whatever he wanted and never face consequences? Over time, I started withdrawing, hiding inside myself. My only peaceful moments were when I locked my bedroom door and put on my headphones. In that silence and music, I was just me. Not Josh's invisible sister. Not the family disappointment. Just me. When our parents died in a stupid sudden car accident, I was 21 and he was 24. It was a shock, of course. But what stuck with me the most wasn't the pain of loss. It was how even in their death, I was still overlooked. At the funeral, everyone went to comfort Josh. "You'll take care of your sister now, right?" They said. "Your parents would be proud of you." No one asked how I was. No one even looked me in the eye. I became a background prop in my brother's grief. Soon after, he called me to talk. Said he'd take care of the house, the bills, the inheritance, to make things easier. I was devastated, so I just nodded. He showed up with papers. Said it was to transfer everything temporarily to his name to avoid legal issues. I signed. I trusted him. Little by little, I started noticing my bank account had less money than expected. That our parents' car, which he said he was keeping for me, was sold. That the old furniture, the family albums, everything was gone. When I asked, he'd say, "Relax, it's all under control." I had nowhere to go, so I kept living in the house with him. But he slowly pushed me out. He started bringing friends over, throwing parties, making noise all night. If I complained, he mocked me. "Oh, now you want to run the house?" One day I came home from work and found all my stuff in the basement. Literally. My books, clothes, personal items, everything piled in damp cardboard boxes in the basement. He said he needed my room for a project, and it was just temporary. I stayed there, cold, surrounded by mold and silence, in my own house, while he slept in the master bedroom with air conditioning and a king-sized bed. Me, on a mattress on the floor, trying to believe this was just temporary. But months turned into years. And every time I tried to stand up for myself, he'd come with some emotional blackmail. "If you report me, you'll lose everything." Or worse, "Remember who helped you when our parents died? You owe me." The truth is, I grew up being told I should be grateful to have Josh, that older brothers are guardian angels, but mine was a demon in disguise, and I realized it way too late. And when I finally tried to pull away, to rebuild my life, he used everything he had against me. my name, my documents, access to what was left of our inheritance. He already had complete control. I just didn't know how much until I was denied that apartment rental. That's when I started connecting the dots. The credit card I never requested, the debts in my name, the guarantor who co-signed loans without my knowledge. Everything was connected, and it all led back to him. And the worst part? When I confronted him, he laughed. That same smug smile he used to give me when he broke my toys and called me stupid. Only now, he held something far more valuable than toys in his hands. My entire identity. I felt dirty, violated, like he had peeled off my skin with a smile on his face. That night, I went to bed with a tightness in my chest that wouldn't let me breathe. I could hear his footsteps upstairs, laughing on the phone, living peacefully with everything he'd stolen from me. And me? I felt like an intruder in my own life. I tried to get help. I went to the bank, to the police. But everything was so messy, so twisted. No one could give me answers. "But you signed here?" they'd say, pointing to documents I'd never seen. Or worse, documents I vaguely remembered, ones he'd had me sign saying it was just for the estate process. I tried to gather proof, but he was always too smart. He planned every detail. I couldn't prove I'd been tricked. I couldn't prove those debts weren't mine. And the more I tried, the more people told me to forget it. To move on. But how do you move on when you've lost everything? And still have to look your thief in the eye every single day? How do you go forward when the person who destroyed you is lounging on the living room couch while your world crumbles around you? I started to break down. I stopped eating properly. I barely slept. I had anxiety attacks that left me curled up on the floor, trembling, heart racing. But he didn't notice. Or rather, he did, and didn't care. Sometimes he'd even ask, in the fakest voice ever, "Are you okay, Emily?" The name he used to sign contracts, steal data, buy things, was the same name he used to ask if I was okay. What a joke. That was when I started having dark thoughts. I thought about disappearing, about doing something drastic just to make the pain stop. But deep down, something in me still held on. A small spark, barely lit, but still there. The will to fight, because no matter how much he'd taken from me, there was still a part of me that knew who I was, who remembered the girl who used to paint alone in her room and, even ignored by everyone, kept creating better worlds on paper. I started saving everything. Screenshots of messages, bank statements, emails, even receipts for deliveries made in my name that I never ordered. Every detail. I spent sleepless nights digging through my own life like a stranger. And with each discovery, each new puzzle piece I placed, the knot in my throat got tighter. I hadn't just been betrayed. I'd been dismantled, piece by piece, by someone who claimed to love me. And once I started collecting evidence, I noticed Josh changed too. It was like he could sense I was pushing back, even though I never said a word. He got more aggressive, more invasive. He started sneaking into the basement at night, rummaging through my boxes, going through my things. I knew because he wasn't careful. My backpack's zipper would be open, papers out of order, my drawings smudged with greasy fingerprints. When I confronted him, he stared at me with that same icy grin. "You're getting paranoid, Emily." But the way he said it, like he was enjoying it, it made me shake. It felt like he wanted me to break, to completely fall apart. And I almost did. One night, I came home from my temp job, the one that barely covered bus fare, and found the basement locked, with a padlock. My belongings, my clothes, my documents, all locked inside. I climbed the stairs, trembling, and knocked on his bedroom door. He opened slowly, like he'd been expecting me. "You can't just touch my stuff," I said, trying to sound firm. He shrugged. "Sure I can. It's my house." I stood there, speechless. Rage bubbled in my chest, but it was like my throat was sealed. "My documents are in there," I managed to say. "Not my problem." He shut the door in my face. That night, I slept sitting on the stairs, cold, hungry, trying not to cry so he wouldn't get the satisfaction of seeing me broken. The next few days were even worse. He started manipulating the neighbors, the few people we knew, spread lies that I was unstable, ungrateful, that I was trying to steal his house. "She's always been unbalanced," I heard him say over the phone. "I'm worried about her, you know?" It was a plan, a campaign. He wanted to isolate me, erase me, and it worked. People who used to wave at me now crossed the street. At work, he started calling and making up stories. Said I was on drugs, had suicidal tendencies. HR called me in, said they were concerned about my behavior. I lost my job 2 weeks later. No explanation. Bit by bit, he was winning. And I could feel it like quicksand pulling me under, each breath harder than the last. I tried to rent a room, used the little money I had left for the first month's rent. But when the landlord ran my background check, he backed out. Debts, bad credit, even a police report filed against me, something I'd never seen before. That's when I started to understand. He was setting me up to fail, to give up. He began provoking me directly. Left notes around the house with phrases like, "No one will believe you," or You should be grateful I still let you stay here. He stuck those notes on the basement door, the fridge, even the bathroom mirror. I tore them up, of course. But he always put new ones, like it was a game. A constant reminder that he controlled everything. I cried in secret in the bathroom, muffling my sobs with a towel. And even then, I was afraid of making too much noise, because I knew he heard it. He fed on my pain. One night, I woke up and saw him standing at the top of the stairs, just his silhouette, dark against the dim hallway light. I'd left the basement door ajar because of the heat, and when I saw that figure, standing there, watching me, my body froze. I couldn't even scream. He stood there for a few seconds, silent, then just turned around and walked away. The next day, he acted like nothing happened, but I knew. He wanted me to see him. He wanted me to know he could come and go whenever he pleased. That's when I started hiding my notebooks and evidence in a hole I made behind one of the boxes. I tore part of the wall lining and created a secret compartment. I had to keep everything safe, the proof, the copies, my attempts to recover my ID number, to access old accounts, anything that could rescue me from this nightmare. But even that, he found. I came home and saw the wall torn, the box ransacked, my papers burned. Yes, burned. He'd made a bonfire in the yard, said he was cleaning up the mess. I nearly fainted. "You're sick," I said, voice shaking. He laughed. "You're the one locked down here like a rat. I'm just living my life." And he was right. He went out, hit bars, flaunted a life on social media that wasn't his. That was mine. My mom's car, my dad's guitar, even our childhood books. He used them all like personal trophies. I became a ghost, and ghosts have no voice. That week I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, not because I wanted to hurt myself, but because I genuinely started to fear what he might do to me. I saw his eyes change, sometimes dark, unblinking, like he hated me just for still being there. But at the same time, it was like he fed off my presence. Like keeping me close was the final trophy. I started having hallucinations, sounds that didn't exist, laughter echoing through the empty basement. I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding. A doctor would probably call it stress, trauma, but how do you explain that your own brother is slowly driving you insane? And still, I stayed, because I had nowhere else to go, because he made sure every exit was blocked. Until one day, I found an envelope slipped under the door. No return address. Just a note on the outside. Careful what you're looking for. Inside was a photo of me, sleeping. Someone, him, had taken a picture of me, in the basement. I started shaking all over. This wasn't just abuse anymore. It was stalking. I went to the police station. For the first time, I told everything. I showed them the envelope, the photo. The officer looked at it and said, "Without concrete proof, there's not much we can do." No proof? What was the photo then? But again, his word against mine. I came back home, defeated, and he was waiting for me at the door. Went out for a walk? I didn't ask how he knew. He always knew. I went straight in, locked the basement door with a makeshift lock. Useless, I knew, but it was all I had. I sat in the dark, trembling. I didn't even know if it was day or night anymore. I started writing messages to myself on the walls. Tiny, hidden. Notes like, "You're alive. You're still you. He won't win." It was the only way to remind myself that there was still someone inside. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just a family conflict. It was a deliberate attempt to erase my existence. And it was working. I couldn't remember the last time I laughed, or had a hot meal, or someone said my name without sarcasm. One night, lying on the cold floor, I felt my body go numb. I thought I was having a stroke, but it was anxiety, so intense that my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried calling emergency services, but the call dropped. The basement always had weak signal. It never felt so cruel. I cried for hours, holding myself, wondering if that was how it would end. If I was going to disappear like this, forgotten, silenced, suffocating in my own home. But something inside me screamed. An old voice, angry, determined. "Get up!" And I got up. With trembling knees and shallow breath, I climbed the stairs slowly, like walking through a minefield. Each step was a risk, but also a declaration. I wasn't going to die there. Not like this. Not at his hands. I threw open the basement door. The air of the house hit me like a slap. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd taken a step outside the grave he tried to bury me in. Update. Last night, something happened that shattered what little was left between us. It was just after midnight when I woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps. Not casual steps. Slow, dragging, like he wanted me to hear. Like he was making his presence known. My door was unlocked. I'd forgotten in the rush upstairs earlier. I got up slowly, silently. My heart was pounding in my throat. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera, desperate to capture anything I could. The house was dark, except for a faint light in the living room. I went over, and there he was, sitting on the couch, shirtless, and in his lap was my journal. The notebook where I wrote everything, my feelings, my plans, my fears. He was reading it aloud. Today, I thought about running away, even if it's on foot, just to breathe some air that doesn't smell like him. Poetic, Emily. And then he laughed. My stomach turned. You went through my stuff? I asked, my voice shaking. Your stuff? He turned slowly, with that same warped smile. Emily, everything here is mine. You're just passing through. At that moment, something inside me broke. It wasn't just anger. It was humiliation. The certainty that I would never be free as long as I was under the same roof as that man. I tried to grab the journal from his hands, but he held it tight. You haven't learned anything, have you? Still weak. Still the victim. He shoved me hard in the chest. I fell backwards, hitting my head on the edge of the wall. Pain exploded through my skull. I lay there, dazed, vision blurry. He looked at me for a few seconds, then tossed the notebook onto me and walked away. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stayed silent. And in that silence, I understood. He wasn't going to stop. He had no limits, and no one was coming to save me. That night, I sat on the kitchen floor, pressing a bloody towel to my head. I was shaking all over, but not just from pain. It was from something else finally taking shape inside me. Hatred. Not loud, impulsive hate. Cold, calculated hate. The kind that grows after years of being buried alive. He pushed me. He hurt me. And he knew exactly what he was doing. And when the sun came up, he left like nothing had happened. Pressed shirt, strong cologne, phone in hand. And me? I was cleaning the blood off the floor with an old rag and cold water. That day, I said nothing. I didn't go out, didn't eat, didn't talk to anyone. I just sat down and started writing again. Not a diary this time. I wrote everything he'd done, in detail. Like a report. Every episode, every note, every manipulation, the shove, the photo of me sleeping. Then I connected my phone to the neighbor's Wi-Fi, something I'd been doing in secret ever since he cut off our internet, and started searching. Lawyers, NGOs, support services for abuse victims. Even though this wasn't a romantic relationship, it was still violence. I sent emails, made whispering calls in the middle of the night, recorded voice memos, sent photos, begged for help, and in every message, my voice got a little stronger. I was still afraid. Of course I was. But at that point, I was angrier than scared. The next night, he came home drunk. The smell of alcohol was strong, his eyes bloodshot. He came straight toward me. You've been real quiet lately. Planning something, Emily? I stood still, silent. He hated when I did that. He got so close I could feel his breath on my face. You never learn, do you? His hand rose like he was going to hit me, but he stopped. He laughed, then walked into the kitchen. And that's when I knew he was scared. Because someone who yells and threatens but doesn't strike is testing your limits. He wanted to see if I was still the same, but I wasn't. I stayed up all night again, my phone hidden inside my pillowcase. I read stories from other women who had gone through family abuse. Brothers, fathers, mothers, uncles, people who had been silenced, discredited, and yet survived. I saw I wasn't alone. And that feeling, that I wasn't alone, was like breathing after being underwater for far too long. The next day, a woman named Tasha called me. She worked for an organization that supports and protects vulnerable abuse victims. I told her everything. She listened, patiently, with empathy. She called me by my name with respect. She gave me a plan, told me what I needed to gather, which documents to separate, how to act. She said it would be hard, but possible. And in that moment, I understood. Either I got out, or he would destroy me completely. Update 2. I did what I never thought I'd have the courage to do, and I don't regret it for a single second. The plan started small. First, I used an old cell phone I'd kept hidden, one of those that still had a SIM card slot. I bought a new number with money I made selling 2 of my drawings online. Yes, there were still people interested in handmade art, and I started testing that, posting anonymously, only when he was out of the house. With Tasha's help, I started building my escape plan. She connected me with a social worker who explained my legal rights. I found out I was still legally tied to part of my parents' inheritance, but I needed proof of coercion, forgery, abuse. So I started recording. Every conversation, every veiled threat, every joke laced with poison. I installed a hidden app on his phone when he left it on the sink during a shower. Not for long, just enough to access saved audios, photos, notes. And that's where I struck gold. There were recordings of him bragging to friends. Emily, she's broken, lives in the basement, she's got nowhere to go. She signed everything and doesn't even know it. And more, scanned copies of the forged documents. Even a PDF with my signature, cut and pasted. I sent everything to Tasha and the lawyer. She told me not to confront him, to stay quiet. You'll come out on top if you keep your cool, she said. And I obeyed. Inside, I was boiling. But on the outside, I became the Emily he thought he still controlled. Quiet, submissive, almost invisible. Meanwhile, I applied for a victim support program with emergency housing. I secured a spot in a safe shelter, far from the city. I started hiding clothes in a grocery bag at the bottom of an old toolbox in the basement. I also stashed real documents and copies of the recordings on 2 flash drives, one with me and one with the social worker. And then, the day came. I was summoned for a preliminary hearing. Yes, we managed to get that. The summons was sent without his name on the envelope, my lawyer's strategy, so he wouldn't suspect anything. I left the house in the morning pretending I was going grocery shopping and went straight to the courthouse. There, I presented everything: the evidence, the recordings, the photos, my written statements, medical reports from the head injury, police call records. They listened, took notes, and said, "You have a case." I cried in the courthouse bathroom, but this time, it was from relief. I went back home and waited. I slept in my clothes, backpack ready, heart pounding. The next morning, 3 police cars pulled up in front of the house. He came down the stairs half asleep, rubbing his eyes, in boxers and a t-shirt. When he saw the cops through the window, he froze, completely still. I was sitting on the stairs, backpack in my lap. I already knew I didn't need to say a word. They knocked on the door. He opened it, tried to smile. "Good morning, is something wrong? Josh Bennett?" "Yes? We have a warrant." His expression changed. First confusion, then denial, then panic. "A warrant for what? This must be a mistake. Sir, you're under investigation for fraud, document forgery, psychological abuse, and unlawful appropriation of assets." From there, it felt like watching a movie. He tried to argue, said it was a misunderstanding, that I was unstable. But this time, no one believed him. They took him away in handcuffs. And before they left, he looked at me. Not with anger, with fear. And in that look, I saw everything I needed to see. I saw that he never imagined I'd be capable, that I'd rise, that I'd fight back. And right there, in that silence between us, I reclaimed what he tried hardest to steal from me: my dignity. I was taken by a support team to a temporary shelter, a simple, clean room, just mine. They gave me a warm cup of coffee and a blanket. I sat on the bed and cried myself to sleep. It wasn't the end. There would still be a battle, a legal process, testimonies, maybe even court confrontations. But for the first time in years, I was out of that house, out of the basement, out of him. In the days that followed, my body still felt trapped in the routine of terror, even though I was far from him. I'd wake up startled at any noise. I'd flinch when someone raised their voice. My reflection in the mirror looked like someone who'd survived a war, but still expected the next attack. But the shelter was safe. The people there, women of all ages with stories just as painful, or worse, welcomed me with empathy I'd never felt before. One of them gave me a necklace with a tiny star pendant. "To remind you that you're bigger than the darkness," she said. I held that gift like a piece of solid ground. My lawyer called me every day. She said the judge had approved the freezing of his assets until the investigation was complete. She said the house, my house, was being reviewed, and there was a good chance I'd legally reclaim the property, along with compensation for the damage. I could barely believe it. It felt like hearing someone tell someone else's story. And even so, every time I remembered him being taken away, it wasn't relief I felt. It was grief. A twisted, strange grief. For the brother I wished I'd had. For the home that never really existed. For the versions of me he'd killed over the years. But along with that grief, there was a spark, a beginning, a chance. I started writing again. Not hidden diaries, but my own texts, with my name. Stories that blended pain and hope, scars and fresh starts. Each word I wrote cracked the walls of the prison he'd built inside me. And for the first time, at the end of one of those texts, I signed something I hadn't used in years. Emily A. Bennett. My name. The name he tried to erase. And now I was taking it back. And as I signed it, I felt my hands steady for the first time in a long while. They didn't shake anymore. They didn't hesitate. It was like, by reclaiming my name, I was stitching back together all the pieces he had tried to tear apart. I wasn't just the victim anymore. I was the author of my own story, and it was just beginning. It's been 3 months since I left that house. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking I'm in the basement, that I'll see his shadow standing at the top of the stairs. It takes a few seconds for my body to realize that the ceiling is different, that the air is lighter, that no one is watching me anymore. The justice process is still ongoing. The case is moving forward. He tried to claim I was unstable, that I did everything out of revenge, but the evidence is too strong. My lawyer says he has no way out. And you know what? For the first time, I believe it. I got a simple job at a community art studio, teaching kids how to draw, how to create, how to use their hands to build something beautiful. That gave me back a part of myself he never managed to steal. I rented a tiny studio apartment with advance money from the support program. It's modest, but it's mine. Every plant, every picture on the wall, every mug in the cabinet, I chose them. I bought them. Nothing in that space smells like him. I catch myself smiling sometimes, for no reason, listening to music while making breakfast, dancing alone in the living room. I hadn't done that in years. Fear never left room for it. Tasha still texts me every week. Sometimes it's just a "how are you?" Other times she sends encouraging quotes, pictures of kittens. She's become more of a family to me than any blood tie ever was. And speaking of blood, no, I have no contact with him. And I don't want any. Even if the courts one day allow for some kind of interaction, my decision is made. The only thing he'll ever get from me is silence. The scars are still here, physical and emotional. Sometimes I look in the mirror and see the faint mark on my forehead. But unlike before, I don't try to hide it, because it doesn't define who I am. It just reminds me of what I survived. Today, when someone asks who I am, I take a deep breath and say proudly, "My name is Emily, and I survived my own brother. And even though I lost almost everything, for the first time in a long while, I feel whole. Not every day is easy. There are mornings when my body feels heavy, when his shadow tries to crawl back through the cracks of memory. But now I have tools. I have names. I have voices that remind me I'm not alone. Sometimes I write letters to myself, not to send, just to remember. You went through this and made it out the other side. You're not weak. You will never be silenced again." I keep those letters in a small wooden box I got at the shelter. I call it my resistance archive. The other day, walking down the street, I heard someone call his name. My body froze out of reflex. But then I realized they weren't calling for him. It was just a coincidence. And in that second, I understood. His name no longer holds power over me. I've started reconnecting with a distant aunt, my mother's sister, whom I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. When I told her everything, she cried, said she always had a feeling something was wrong, but never knew what. She hugged me like she wanted to put all the broken pieces back together, and I let her. For the first time, I let someone hold me. Today, every step I take outside that house is a silent victory. I don't need to shout that I survived. My silence holds more strength than any word he ever used to try and destroy me. Sometimes the pain still visits, but now it sits on the other side of the table. It doesn't run anything here anymore. And if someone asks what happened to me, I say calmly, I was hurt by someone who should have protected me, but I was also saved by myself. And that to me is the greatest triumph.